God, we thank you for this day, for the opportunity that we have to come together, to read together, to study together, to talk together, learning more about what you want from us today through your word. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we're going to do the blocks a little differently this time, which you'll see in a little bit. Today we were starting in chapter 10 in the middle and going through all of chapter 11. What stood out for you the most? What did you learn, or what did you have a question about?
In the notes on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
It says 4 conditions are given for drawing near to God. It's your part. Full assurance that faith brings. Heart sprinkled from a guilty conscience. And bodies washed through water.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote down the same parts about the 5.
Oh, yeah.
It was in that same section.
That's above it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
I think this one was a little more encouraging. I was reading a lot about how get back to where you're supposed to be, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
This one was more like, this is why, this is how.
Uh-huh. It is kind of a different section, isn't it? That's one reason why it's on a different day. Right. What else? Did you see anything highly familiar about what you read this time?
Quite a few examples of faith.
Okay.
We have lived faith.
Okay.
Chapter 11.
Some people even call chapter 11 the faith chapter, because that's kind of what it's all about. Examples is a good way to put it.
I've never been one to do this. I heard that the positive stuff, keeping it journal, so that you can go back and see how God has answered prayers. I kind of see this, kind of similar, like, you're so accustomed to living in now and tomorrow that we fail to look at what God has done. Help give us the faith.
So it's kind of, it's kind of a memory jogger, sort of. Okay. Did you recognize all those people that were mentioned in chapter 11?
I actually had to look up what to do.
You had to look them up. All right.
I knew the name, but it was like, what happened? Yeah, what was the one that was taken up? Enoch.
Enoch.
I went back and, so who was this guy?
Yeah, that's the idea. Good for you.
There wasn't a lot of other than
Right. That's all we know about him. That's pretty much all we know about him. Yeah. So, okay. What else? Anything? Shall we read some? Starting with 19, read through 25. Somebody. Ten, 19.
Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the most high place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way open for us through the curtain, that is, his body. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from guilty, having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. Let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some do, but let us encourage one another all the more as the day approaches.
That's enough for now. What does that tell you? What is that talking about? It's those things that Kathy mentioned a while ago. The state of mind when the new covenant comes along. That's those four things that Kathy was talking about a while ago. A true heart, assurance of faith, sprinkled clean from evil conscience, and washed with pure water. What do you see in there besides those characteristics of somebody who is a new covenant person?
Well, in some ways, I felt like verse 25 was current. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. We keep talking about COVID and how people quit coming to church.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels pretty current to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Churches are still.
Yeah, we're still suffering. We
We're
still don't have the attendance.
We're still having that difficulty.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, people deciding they don't need this.
The fellowship is fun.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Here's the way somebody put it. Every Christian needs the encouragement of every other Christian. Or to say it even another way, everyone who comes through the door is an encouragement to everybody else who's already there in the room. Motivation for coming together. Worship is an important part of what he's talking about there. So we could say, just show up, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. If nothing else, just show up.
When my husband and I first started dating, he was a Christian, wasn't a faithful church goer. And I kind of told him, I said, well, it's kind of basic. He said, well, sure, I'll go with you. I said, you're going to discover that the people at church will start meeting your friends. And, you know, after we kept going and we got married in the church, and it was, you know, and he did, it was like, I never would have thought that my social life would revolve around the church. He wasn't even aware that and it wasn't even an option, not that even, you know, bad or negative connotations to it, but that was even a church or just something you went to on Sunday. And there was stuff going on all week long.
Mm-hmm. And you might want to socialize with those people.
Yeah, you know, you're gonna be your best friends.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But you got to
show up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not gonna know that until you show up.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
used to say in exercise class, the hardest part was just getting there, just showing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And that might be true of other things too.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Could have churches that portray the movies, comedians and everything. But different than art.
Yes.
But why they can't figure it out.
Probably because they don't go.
Yeah, they have to show up.
Could be. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway. Remember, we talked earlier about drifting. And that's one of the things that this is talking about, just allowing yourself to drift away. Get out of the habit of showing up, of coming. Worship, to give worth to something. That's somebody's definition of worship. Interesting. Okay, so anyway, let's read some more.
After we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of patient fire that will consume enemies of God. Anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much more severe do you think a man deserves to be as trampled the Son of God underfoot, who has treated as an holy thing the blood of the covenant that sanctifies, and who has insulted the Spirit of grace? For you know him who said, "It is mine to possess, I will repay." And again, the Lord will judge. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God.
What is that one all about?
Punishment for sin.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to scare us. It works.
It is kind of scary, isn't it?
Mhm.
I will repay.
I don't think and we haven't failed. He allows it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Uh-huh. Yeah, we've talked about that before, haven't we? It's talking about judgment for sure, but warning that that's not the way. If we willfully persist after having received the knowledge of the truth, there's some stuff in Paul's letters that is talking about that, isn't there? About it's some kind of backsliding. If you say you believe in Jesus, but then you reject that, is that what this is talking about? It's somewhere where we read this week. If you willfully persist in sin after having received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. Because Jesus is the once for all sacrifice, he's not going to do that over again. essentially. It's been done. It's a confusing section, isn't it? But yeah. Anyone who has violated the law of Moses dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. That's from the Old Testament law. How much worse will it be when those who have spurned the Son of God profane the blood of the covenant and outrage the Spirit? There's some of that better again, except it's not better, it's worse this time because of what he's talking about, right?
Kind of reminds me of the Old Testament eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of what I'm saying. You don't believe, if you're false in your belief, then you'll get judged. Will get yours.
Yeah. The Lord will judge his people. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. In verse 32, there's a however. Somebody read all the way to the end from 32.
Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering? Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times, you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the compensating of your, I can't say that word, or your property, because you knew that you yourself had better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that you have done the will of God. You will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. And by my righteous one, but my righteous one will live by faith. And I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved.
That's a better therefore, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's like those two paragraphs kind of need to go together. Yeah. There's this whole question of why does God let bad things happen to good people? You've probably heard that discussion before, haven't you?
I read that book.
You have?
I have.
Okay.
Years ago, decades ago.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you conclude after reading that book?
Well, it was written by a Jewish rabbi.
Uh-huh.
And basically, we live in a fallen world, and things are just going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to get sick. People are going to die. There are going to be accidents because we make simple, stupid mistakes and stuff like that. Things are just going to happen. So try to get over yourself. God still loves you. You know,
Yeah.
You know, bad things might happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
After my dad passed away, we had sat down as girls and had a discussion with my mother, because she kept blaming God. It's like, no, God didn't make it happen, Mom. He uses it maybe after it happens, but he didn't make it happen. Because she kept saying, oh, God took my son and God took my husband now and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I don't know, you guys, you have more faith than I do.
I went through a real faith crisis because I had a miscarriage. And we knew there were problems in there and stuff. And I prayed to God, you know, you can cure this little baby. You can make this baby right. You can do anything. And didn't. I was damn you God mad even. You know? It took me a while to get over that. But he didn't cause that. It was just something that happened. That's all. You know,
It is.
I just
Mhm.
needed to get over myself and get on.
It's hard.
I had two
Sometimes
more
it's hard,
healthy
though.
children afterwards, and so,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
it's just, boy, I was mad for a
Well,
while.
it took me a long time to maybe the fact of my disability and my differences
Mhm.
with my hands and feet to accept them and say, you know, God made me that way. That's what I always tell kids as a teacher, because students always notice it, but I taught like first, second, kindergarten.
Mhm.
It's like God made me that way.
And they're going to ask
Okay,
you
that's fine.
at that age.
Yeah.
They're going to ask you, right, out loud.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But I was in high school before I decided that it was their problem.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah.
hard, it would, yeah.
Because I
Mhm.
wore braces on my legs, so it's sixth grade,
Yeah.
you know, different things.
Yeah. Hard to be different.
There's a note in this book that I thought was interesting and applicable to this whole little section here. It comes from a New Testament scholar called Donald Guthrie. The author of this is quoting him. It's a mark of the mature Christian to understand God's will in a way that makes room for adverse events. I thought that was kind of interesting. We need to write that up here. That's an R. Adverse events. Making room for adverse events. That's kind of an interesting way to put it. There's some more suffering that we're going to hear about later on. But somebody else says adversity can be a valuable ally. Now, why would that be?
We grow from it. We allow God to help us grow from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we learn how to help other people when they're going through something similar.
That could be too. Mm-hmm.
Well, I consider now if I wouldn't have my disability and stuff, that I'd be a totally different person. I'd have totally different attitude and everything else. But it makes you the way you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, C.S. Lewis has an interesting way of describing hell. And they describe it as sort of a bus stop, and the bus to heaven sitting there. And there's, you know, another one that obviously goes to hell. And everybody's so busy trying to fix things and do things and stuff like that. They, oh no, we can't get on that bus. We're too busy for that. It's like God's just sitting there. Here I am. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Contrasting the faithful with those who think they can manage for themselves.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
They think for themselves.
Thank you, C.S. Lewis. Not me.
That came out of one of these books. Whenever a regime, this is what we talked about last week. Whenever a regime exists which claims absolute power and regards Christian faith and witness as a threat, Christians will come under attack. Yeah. Jesus has gone ahead into God's future world and is already there on our behalf, which puts us out of tune with those other people. I don't particularly feel out of tune with some people, but the more advertising you see on TV, it's like, they're not talking to me. we're sort of out of tune with whoever's responding to and responsible for those ads.
Makes me think about the thought of we're spiritual beings who are on a temporary physical journey. So in that sense, we're kind of out of sync with the world we're in. Because our eternity is spiritual.
We've talked about that before too, haven't we? That some of these things that Hebrews has talked about are temporary, waiting for the real thing to come along.
Jesus has gone ahead.
Yeah. Does that help us feel better about this section that's kind of crazy to read? Let's read some more. Let's read about faith. How about? I don't know. Let's see. Read until you have a question about who that is.
Our faith is being sure of what we hope for, and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were committed. By faith, we understand that the universe is formed by God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of physical. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man, and God spoke well of his offering. And by faith, he still speaks, even though he is dead. By faith.
Okay, pause.
Okay.
Who's Abel?
Adam and Eve's sons.
Cain and Abel, they were,
Adam and Eve's sons.
now I can't even my brain.
Sibling rivalry, that's what it was.
Yes.
Two boys, what could go wrong? You know, like teenagers.
I know, two girls are just about that.
You can't see what?
Killed by his brother.
Maybe it's talking about before he got killed.
And it says, and by faith he still speaks, even though he's dead.
Because we know what happened to him and kind of why, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Where are we in the Bible when we talk about Abel? Where is that?
Genesis.
Pick up the book. There, that one. Okay, good. We know where we are. Just set it on the table. There we go. Okay. Read some more.
By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him.
Okay. So where's Enoch? Mm-hmm.
Genesis.
Yep.
You know it.
Yes, we haven't gotten to Noah yet, have we? Was that name unfamiliar to any of you? That's the one you.
Familiar. It was one of those things. Oh yeah, I've heard that before.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought that there was a lot more to it than when I went back to read.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is an extra biblical writing, the book of Enoch, that I've heard of, but I think it's got questionable things in it.
Uh-huh.
That's my understanding, but some people like to read that book.
I don't know.
He's one of two people that didn't die, Enoch and Elijah. The other one, Jared came down and got him.
Yeah.
He goes.
One of
Makes
those.
a lot of difference.
Mm-hmm.
What they said. Oh, either way.
So
Might come back.
Yeah, so that one comes from the 5th chapter of Genesis. You know, all those first 10 chapters of Genesis are prehistory, and, you know, from Abraham forward, we can kind of put a date on it, but the things that it talks about before that, it's like, who knows how old that was or how, when that would have happened. But Genesis chapter 5 is where you find it talking about Enoch.
Verses 18 through 24.
Something like that. 5. We know who his father was. Yeah. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. Methuselah's dad. We've heard of him before. Yeah, he's more famous. Enoch walked with God after the birth of Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all of his days were 365 years. He walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. He walked with God. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so that's still in Genesis, right? So keep reading. Who's next?
By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, and holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world that is the heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Want to talk about Noah?
Where do we find Noah?
Genesis.
Still in Genesis. That's what we know about him. Why?
God
The
told him
world.
God told him to. There have been movies portraying him. I remember, what's that guy's name? The actor, John Huston.
Oh, yeah.
There's a movie that John Huston got to play Noah, and you can just hear him arguing with God, but more importantly, withstanding the ridicule from the crowd. What, you're sitting here and there's not a drop of rain, and you're building a boat in the middle of the desert. That kind
Your mind.
Yes. So that's
because of his relationship with God, he appeared different, just as the early Christians appeared different
mm-hmm.
than the Jewish faith.
Mm-hmm.
They were not just as now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should appear different.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody keep reading. We keep interrupting. Anybody?
By faith, Abraham, then called to go to the place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs of him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sands on the seashore.
Mm-hmm.
All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one.
Mhm.
Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, and for he was preparing a seed for them.
Mhm. Yeah.
By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac.
Oh, well, let's pause there and not talk about the sacrifice yet. We've got some definitions at the beginning of 11 that we didn't really talk about. Let's go back to verse 1. What is faith according to this writer?
Be sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see.
Yeah. Somebody says, looking at God and trusting Him for everything. That was kind of interesting. And the author of Hebrews, as well as the people in the book, are connecting it with hope as well. Faith and hope seem to kind of go together a lot. Hope is looking at the future and trusting God for it. Faith gives hope, assurance, and conviction. Those are all good words. Faith, hope, assurance, and conviction. That's what enables those people to do those things that this chapter is referring to, not necessarily talking about. Because remember, the writer of Hebrews is presuming that these people know this history. They know what he's talking about. Did we miss a joke back here? There was a funny line. Did you see it? Where was it? No, it hasn't come up yet, I guess. Somewhere in this chapter, there's a place where he says, I don't have time to tell you any more right now. And then he keeps talking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I don't remember. It's not right here. But we'll find it in a little bit.
32.
Oh, 32. What more can I say? And yeah,
And then goes on with the line.
yes. You know, the Bible is humorous in a lot of ways, a lot of places that you don't expect.
No, he talks about it, him as good as dead.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's,
Yeah.
it gives me a chuckle.
Yeah. It must have been the writer of one of these books that says, at this point in the scripture, that's enough deep theology for the moment. Let's bring some characters on the stage. That wasn't the author of Hebrews. That was the author of one of these books saying that. Let's see. We got to Abraham and Sarah. Where did we stop?
16,
17.
ready for 17.
Oh, okay. We got that. Oh, okay. Noah believed and took action just like all the rest of them did. They believed something and they acted on it. Did you pass by the mention of the city back in verse 10? They're talking about Abraham. Looked forward to the city that has foundations.
Is that Jerusalem? Or is that heaven?
I think that's going to be heaven. Remember,
My note said the city is the heavenly.
mhm. Which we know something about because we just talked about it when we studied Revelation, right? The city that has foundations, as opposed to the tabernacle in the wilderness that was very mobile. Interesting contrast. So let's start at 17 and keep going. We're still talking about Abraham, but somebody read.
By Abraham, excuse me, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. So in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith,
Okay,
Isaac.
pause there.
Okay.
Where do we find this story?
Genesis 22.
You realize that the story of Abraham and the story of Isaac and the story of Jacob and the story of Joseph all kind of overlap each other because of all those family relationships that we read about, and we're still in Genesis. Sacrifice of Isaac. What was that all about anyway?
Testing Abraham's faith, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if he did that now, his son would be taken from him because he'd be a bad parent.
Yeah, really.
Yes, so.
Yeah, yeah,
When I tell
yeah.
my kids, imagine we went home after church and Dad says, "Okay, I just got a message from God, and we're gonna get some more charcoal here in the back porch, and just stick
We're gonna
with me for a
grill
little
you."
bit."
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Although what I
CPS
tell
will
them
come in.
is, he's also saying no more human sacrifice. Plenty of animals are gonna go down the tubes, but before this, there were human sacrifices.
Yeah.
That seems to be a clear thing also. This is a message, no more human action. There's a heck of a way of showing it. We've been to that rock. In Israel. You can go, but you can't go there.
You can't go there right now. You can't go there right now. But yeah.
Yeah. It's in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
So
The Dome of the Rock is built over it. It's a Muslim.
where Mohammed began his night. Also, Jesus with his disciples, there's a cave underneath. And not a busy rock.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so keep reading. we know that's in Genesis about 22.
Somebody built it, right?
Oh, okay, that's what that sound was. I thought it was this phone ringing. Okay, so after that verse, we're at verse 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Keep reading, somebody.
By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed the Joseph's son and worshipped as he lay on the top path. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about
Okay. That's a good place to pause. They just went over a whole bunch of history really fast, didn't they?
Yeah, really.
Really fast. We're still in Genesis, but just barely. We've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob is the one who has the 12 sons, one of whom was Joseph. And Joseph has perhaps one of the more interesting stories in Genesis. But what is this talking about? Why does this bring him up? What are all of these talking about?
Joseph must have known that they were going to go back to the Holy Land because he gave instructions about taking his bones back. He had faith in some
He
way.
was looking ahead. That's another phrase we need to put up here.
Yeah.
Looking ahead. The point of going through these is that these these examples of faith, they were all looking ahead. They could see they didn't know what was going to happen, but they knew because of their relationship with God, they knew that they were looking ahead. As each one of these generations blessed the next generation, that was a forward-looking thing to do. That's what that one was talking about. And it's that's something that we need to do also. Looking ahead. Do you know that we know that I need to drink some water here. That's okay. Joseph's story is right at the end of Genesis. But do you know that he's also in Exodus? Where is that? I think Joseph. 13:19. Exodus 13:19. So I guess we better get Exodus out of the box. Somebody read that. Exodus 13:19.
Moses took the bones of Joseph, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear to do this. He said, God will certainly come to help you. When he does, you must take my bones with you from this place.
Mm-hmm. So it's a connection between Genesis and Exodus. The Genesis story and the Exodus story is just a continuation. So what else is in there? Let's see. We're down to what, 23? Keep going.
By faith, Moses' parents gave in for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's wife. He chose to be along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the pleasure. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasure for the person was taken ahead. By faith,
he led each, not fearing the kings. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By
Let's,
faith the walls of Jericho.
okay, we need to pause there. Yeah. You're at verse 28 and 29. Yeah. Okay, good. Examples of faith. That's a good way to put this. Each one of these people was looking ahead, looking forward, perhaps not knowing what was going to happen exactly, but knowing that there was a future ahead of them. And that's kind of what faith is all about.
Never realized where there's a lot of parallels with Joseph and Moses, that they were brought to a place where they could have had a lot of power, riches, and chose to say no, follow my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I think living now quite often have a hard time with a lot of the New Testament and Old Testament, where it was also violent. If you weren't persecuted, if you weren't thrown in jail, if you weren't, then your faith wasn't really being tested. And it's like, well, I've never had any of those experiences, nor do I see much of an opportunity for that to happen. But when I read about Joseph and Moses, it's like, well, I not that I've been in a position of power and great wealth and all of that, but there are decisions that my husband and I have made through the years. He was, in the engineering firm, and he could have traveled and taken the foreign assignments, and ran out when he really wanted to, but it was more important for him to be with us than the family at home. So he didn't take the promotions. He didn't take the things that would have furthered his career. He did fine, but there were opportunities. He knows of coworkers that are now, big mega houses because they took the foreign assignments. But family was more important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I can kind of relate to them a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
to now.
Yeah. Some of my favorite stories are those stories that different people do, talking about Joseph and his situation, or Moses and his situation.
Obviously did something, but it's just, they were, oh, God just continues to bless me and be happy about it. It's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah. Stuff that we choose. One of these people said something about the constant challenge for us is to try to make those individual decisions about which way to go. It is still a problem for us. It keeps also reminding me of some of my favorite movies. My mother and I got to go see Donny Osmond do Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat on stage once upon a time. So that's one of my favorite movies. If you haven't ever seen that, it's a cute telling of Joseph's story. And he does a really good job of it. I saw a picture of Donny Osmond on TV not that long ago. He's getting old.
Aren't we all?
He doesn't look like he did when he was back doing Joseph on stage. So anyway, let's see, that put us, where we're in chapter 11 and we're, yeah. Oh, I think we stopped with Jericho. Start with 30 and read a little bit.
It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, and the walls came crashing. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God. She had given them.
It doesn't mention that. Does it in your Bible? It doesn't mention Joshua by name, but by the mention of Jericho, we know who that was. And it's also talking about Rahab. Who in the world is that? Mm-hmm.
That didn't she save the? I can't even remember. The people that went in to
The
see
spies,
what
the spies, the advance party that was supposed to go check out the territory.
she helped them out.
She helped them. So when it came time to actually move into that region, 40 years later, she and her family were saved because of her, yes, her demonstration of faith there. It's interesting. She's one of, find the beginning of Matthew really quick. That's not going to say, but anyway, the very first chapter of Matthew. You know, I rarely advise people to, if they want to read the New Testament, just start with Matthew. It's like, don't start with Matthew, because the first thing you're going to get is a genealogy, and you're going to get bored and you're going to give up. But that genealogy is useful for some things in here. Verse 5. He's going backwards. The genealogy is going from Abraham to David in that paragraph. And so Salmon is the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. This is the lineage of Jesus. It's also, by the way, the lineage of David. And in Matthew, this genealogy starts with Abraham. Some other places, it goes even further back than that. But she's there. She's one of the few women who's mentioned in this genealogy of Jesus. And I think it's kind of interesting, since women were not necessarily high priority among the authors of the various writings in the Bible. And this is the same Rahab they're talking about. Let's see, that was Yeah, that was verse 31. I think we found it. Somebody read verse 32.
How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to tell the stories of the great Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, all the prophets. I take these people over to who will do justice and speak with honesty. They shut them out of life. They death and their wickedness is strength for the strong and battle. The whole then you see their love and death. That others were tortured, refused to turn from God. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prison. Some died by stoning, some were slaughtered. Others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed. They were too good for this world, wanted over this, having all these people earned a good reputation with their faith, yet none of them was all that God. For God had something better in mind, so that they would not be.
There's the joke right there. We don't have time to talk about all these people. And in fact, mercifully, he didn't reiterate all of their individual stories, but in this summary paragraph, he covered them nonetheless.
Yeah.
So, do you recognize any of those people? Samson is there. Yeah, yeah.
Gideon was a military leader.
Mm-hmm. So where are we now when we're talking about all these people? We kind of left off with Jericho. Where's Jericho in the Bible?
Exodus?
Not yet.
Oh.
Yeah, pick up Joshua. We've got Genesis, we've got Exodus. Now we're talking about what happened after that. Joshua took over from Moses, remember? That's how we know that that's what comes after the Pentateuch over there. Rahab is part of his story. Gideon. There's a, yes, the one with the music. Yes. Veggie Tales has a story about Gideon that's wonderful.
They did, but I know.
Yeah. Which way are these going? I don't care. That can be upside down. It's okay. So the story of Gideon you can read about in Judges. Where's the next one of these? Barak, B-A-R-A-K. Who is that? Did anybody look him up? B-A-R-A-K.
Judge who fought with Deborah against Canaanite.
Mm-hmm. So we're still in Judges with that one. Isn't that the one where somebody used a spike through somebody's head?
Yep.
It's a story he likes to talk about, and I don't.
My kids, yeah,
Okay, that must be a
you
popular
know,
one.
Sunday morning, it's really hard to get kids' attention.
That one does.
Yes, that's part of that
Yeah,
story.
you sleep and lay it on the side, right through the side. Then kids stay.
You said you know about Samson. That's also in Judges. Jephthah beat the Ammonites. Isn't he the one who made a bad promise? Is he the one who made a
Kept some stuff back for what it's supposed to.
rash
Oh.
promise? Judges 11. Jephthah.
He was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute.
Isn't that the one?
Okay. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. You are not going to get any inheritance in our family, they said, because you are the son of another woman. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him and followed him. Sometime later, when the Ammonites made war on Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob.
We need to skip ahead a little bit.
Okay.
Verse 30. We're in Judges 11, verse 30. Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whoever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return victorious shall be the Lord's, to be offered up as a burnt offering. That was unwise.
His daughter came out.
His daughter came out to say hi when he came back. But he had already promised. So yes, Jephthah is the one who made an unwise decision. One of the points of bringing that up is that these people in this litany of faithful people is not full of perfect people. They didn't always make the right decision.
Well, Jonah got drunk after he got back on land.
Yeah.
Noah.
Noah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Noah.
That's
At least a prostitute, one or two murderers.
that's an old joke that you just reminded me of. That it's a question: how many animals did Jonah take into the ark? And it's like no, that was Noah. That wasn't.
My
You know,
faux
Yeah.
pas.
Just by naming the wrong person in a familiar story, you
Especially
can.
if it's coming from someone of authority, I would,
Yeah.
she knows what she's talking about, I'm gonna believe you.
No, and that may not even be the way the question goes exactly. But mixing up those names doesn't serve us well. It's better to be more familiar with those stories. Anyway, Jephthah, yes, he's the one who made a bad decision, but he did some faithful things as well, which is what you were reading about before I interrupted you. Now, back to Hebrews. We are Yeah, we read all the way to the end, didn't we? Yeah. Jephthah, David is mentioned, Samuel. David, we know lots about him. Where's my marker? David. And Samuel. Okay. We know lots about David. And David did some very faithful things and deserves to be in this litany of faithful people that the author of Hebrews doesn't have time to tell us all about. All over again, see the Old Testament. Where do we find stories of David and Samuel? Where else?
For Samuel.
In Samuel. So, Samuel and the prophets. And the prophets means all the rest of these books. Prophets. All of that. And then there's this other list. Who is he talking about? Conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouth of lions. Who's that talking about? Daniel. Mm-hmm. Quench the raging fire. That's
Shadrach,
yeah. That's also in that section. Escape the edge of the sword. That's. Did you look that one up? I mean, these are not obvious, but then we get into the history of these other kings. Here's what this chart says. Elijah escaped the sword in 1 Kings 19. Women received loved ones back from the dead. I'm sure that happened more than once. And so on. Cut in two, an old tradition says that King Manasseh, who's in 2 Kings, killed Isaiah by cutting him in two. I don't think that's in the scripture, but that's what it says. I don't know if your study Bible has a note about that or not. Caves and so on.
Perhaps refers to Isaiah.
Uh-huh. Looking ahead, the great crowd. Is suffering a problem or not? Somebody referred to suffering as an apparent problem. And that goes back to, did we write it up there? Looking ahead. Looking ahead. The apparent problem of suffering because God gave these people faith to endure in spite of that. How did we say it a while ago? Remind me what we said. It was from one of these other sections. That's a good question. God gave them strength to endure through faith, the advance guard for God's future. This is for sure. The world did not deserve them. The world did not deserve them. The world in general, the world that was working against them. Why is it important to think about all these things, some of which are kind of gory and unpleasant? It's important to know, I mean, this is in our Bible. It's our history. It's important to know that. And it's also important to pass that on to other people. We need to know the story. That's why we spend so much time becoming more familiar with what's in the Bible and how to find it if we're trying to look for something. It's important to know what's being told in here. And it's also important to share that with other people. Know the story, tell the story. That's what we're trying to do. Tell it to, we can't just tell it to everybody because they don't all want to hear it. But for anybody who's looking for an answer, if we know what's in here, we can share it with those other folks. And that's the important thing. What else did you find as you went through this and looked at it? Study notes, etc.
One thing that just kind of hit me as we're reading it together,
Mhm.
and is that in today's society, it's so, we want instant gratification. But yet they say that, these people from our history, they never saw the promise,
Mm-hmm.
but they had faith, and they kept
Right.
their faith, even though they didn't live long enough to see the promised land or to see, whatever they were promised.
Mm-hmm.
But they kept that faith, knowing that future generations they were,
Mm-hmm.
that was carried on. That's important for us now. Like
Right.
whenever, I expect it now. I think we won't want to buy it. It's, maybe my promise is setting the groundwork for my children's or my children's children.
Mm-hmm.
Down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you don't see the end result doesn't mean you don't.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Good point. What else? Make room for adverse offense. There's going to be stuff that's going to happen. We just have to get through it or beyond it. Right, right. Here's a question. I asked it earlier. Let's think about it again. What do we want to do next? Next time we're going to be in the rest of Hebrews, chapters 12 and 13. What comes after that? Yeah, Easter, I know. We had a suggestion of looking at the minor prophets. Other people have suggested that before. What else are you curious about? What else would you like to learn some more about? Think about it. Send me an email. Let me know what you think. We take the summer off. We don't do summer. We like to be done before Easter, and we will be this year, I hope. But when school starts again, we'll begin again. And by that time, we need to have already known what we were doing so we can kind of get ready for it. So think about we've been in the New Testament, even though it didn't feel like it, for a couple of times now. We could dredge up that old Minor Prophets game. We have a Minor Prophets board game at home. We would have to hunt for. What else? If you think of something, let me know. And we'll see what the Wednesday evening folks have to say as well. Yeah, we can't forget about them. Okay. Would somebody feel called to close us with a word of prayer?